Enough. Muammar Gaddafi and his sons are telling the Libyans, either I rule you or I kill you. It is clear. This evening, after tens of our brothers were killed in Tajura, in eastern Tripoli, he came out in a speech before children who were brought from asylums and some soldiers dressed in civilian clothes, and he told them, I will burn Libya. I will distribute arms to the tribes. Libya will turn red because of blood. Is this because of glory, or is it because of the people? Muammar Gaddafi cannot give a single weapon to any person in Libya because it will be used against them. I regret to be in this position. Today, I listened to him telling his people, either I rule over you, or I kill you, I destroy you. Don't be afraid. Libya is united. Libya will remain united. Libya will be a progressive state. But I tell my brother Gaddafi, leave the Libyans alone.
The Libyan ambassador was joined in his quasi-rebellion by Libyan diplomats to two major UN groups, including the Human Rights Council. Libya's ambassador to France has also declared his support for the pro-democracy protesters. Hafed Al-Ghawel is a Libyan-American analyst. He joins me from our Washington, D.C. studio. So thank you very much for joining us. When we look at the events today in Libya, we seem to be getting contradictory messages from Colonel Gaddafi and his son. On the one hand, the colonel made a very defiant speech saying that he will arm his supporters to take on the protesters. His son, in a later speech, said that he's looking for negotiations. He wants a ceasefire. What do you make of what they're saying?
Well, it reflects two basic things. One is that they are living outside of reality around them. They have convinced themselves of all kinds of conspiracy theories. And on the other hand, the son is a little bit more realistic, and he realizes the gravity of the situation. And he is trying to negotiate a way out for him. Unfortunately, I think he is too late. He should have done that much earlier than this. I think he should not have made that speech he made a few days ago, which made him come across no different than his father.
Who do you believe is in control here? Who's calling the shots, Colonel Gaddafi or his son?
I don't think either one of them is, to be honest with you. I think Gaddafi has been an isolated. This is the tragedy of most dictators in the world, especially Arab dictators. Once they isolate themselves in this bubble of people who are only willing to tell them the good news constantly, and they control everything. They are people who are literally living with both eyes blinded. There is nobody out there willing to come and tell them the truth. They cannot see it on television because there's no free media. So, you know, they're outside of reality. Saif is not a person who has a strong personality or is capable of controlling anything. I think what you are seeing is others in the shadow who are running the show and who have been controlling a great deal of what's happening for a while. People like Musa Kosa or Abdullah Sunusi, the people who really run the security apparatus.
Now, we also heard Western nations ramping up the pressure today. We heard from the United States. They say that they will impose sanctions on the Gaddafi regime. The European Union also says that it's finalized a set of sanctions, which includes freezing assets, banning travel by senior members of the regime, as well as an arms embargo. Do you think any of this is going to help?
I think it is. I mean, every effort. Look, the international community today is facing a very real choice. Either they act collectively and in a unified form with credibility, with transparency, with a genuine interest in solving this problem, or they will be setting a precedent that is extraordinarily dangerous around the world. If they allow a dictator, a deranged dictator, to hold his own people hostage and kill them live on televisions as we are all watching, what will stop others from following the same precedent? So it is critical that at this stage for the international community to move from statements and declarations into real action and really try to put together both a political structure that is viable and a political umbrella that could guarantee the free space for Libyans to reach a political solution to this, or they will lose far more than just Libya.
Okay, so we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, as we've just been discussing, the White House says the U.S. is finalizing sanctions it intends to place on Libya's government.
Consistent with the President's tasking to the government to prepare options to hold the Libyan government accountable for its violation of human rights, we have decided to move forward with unilateral sanctions, which we are in the process of finalizing. Coordinated sanctions with our European allies and multilateral efforts to hold the Libyan government accountable through the United Nations. The President spoke today with Prime Minister Erdogan of Turkey to coordinate our efforts to respond to developments in Libya and to ensure appropriate accountability. In his call with President Erdogan and his separate calls with President Sarkozy of France, Prime Minister Cameron of the United Kingdom, and Prime Minister Berlusconi of Italy yesterday, the President explained the unilateral measures that the United States is implementing and noted his desire to coordinate on measures that our allies are considering. He will continue these consultations to build international consensus for strong measures in the days to come.
I can tell you that I have convened an emergency meeting in the NATO Council.
Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen has called an emergency meeting to discuss the worsening unrest in Libya. The alliance will also be imposing sanctions on Libya, but has no intention of intervening directly.
I will return to Brussels in a few hours.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has been speaking to world leaders. He urged the Security Council to take immediate action to stop the violence in Libya.
Today we have received further reports of violent clashes with high casualties. We have also further reports of gross and systemic violation of human rights. These include indiscriminate killings, arbitrary arrests, shootings of peaceful demonstrators. We expect the situation to worsen. The World Food Programme warns that Libya's food supplies are running dangerously low. In my conversations with leaders of the region and the world, and in my public and private statement, I have spoken out bluntly and repeatedly. The violence must stop. Those responsible for so brutally shedding the blood of innocents must be punished. Fundamental human rights must be respected. The challenge for us now is to protect Libyan civilians and do all we can to halt the ongoing violence. We must be mindful of the urgency of the moment. In these circumstances, the loss of time means more loss of lives.
People fleeing Libya have found sanctuary on the nearby island of Malta. A U.S.-chartered ferry carrying around 300, mostly U.S. citizens, finally arrived in Valletta. Rough weather delayed the sailing from Tripoli for 2 days. Malta's hotels are already full of people who fled Libya by air after the nearby island of Lampedusa was flooded by refugees. After the revolution in Tunisia, Malta is bracing itself for a similar influx. Cal Perry has more from Malta.
Now, over 300 civilians arriving here in the port of Malta, carrying with them stories from Tripoli. Most people said the fighting was worse at night. Everyone agreeing that the humanitarian situation is growing worse by the day. People having trouble finding basic things like food and water. Almost everybody who arrived here said that the boat trip was incredibly difficult. 2 days in port, followed by a 9-hour journey through very rough waters.
I think it was rough because we stayed docked idle for about 2 nights, and then today, this is a trip that's supposed to take 6 or 7 hours. Took us about 9.5 hours. High seas, the situation was pretty bad. High waves and what have you.
Also perhaps a watershed moment for many governments around the world who were afraid to threaten Colonel Gaddafi's regime while their civilians were still on the ground. Now, of course, the conversation can turn to potential military intervention.
Anger is also spilling onto the streets elsewhere. Coming up, we are in Iraq, where a show of anger against government corruption was met with deadly force. And it's high-five time in Ireland from the party leader who urged voters to turn their anger into action over the busted economy.
Welcome back to your weather forecast. We are first going to start with Japan. They have had a nice little break over the last couple of days, but more rain is going to be coming into their forecast. As you can see here, this right here is an area of high pressure. That means all the clouds have dissipated, but it's been bringing a little bit of cooler air into the forecast. Now over towards the west, some snow, some rain, and normally this would be bad news, but for China, this is actually very good news over the next couple of days. They have seen some incredible drought conditions over the last weeks and months. So we're going to be getting rain, we're going to be getting snow. The snow will actually stay until the spring, melt, and help those farmers in need. A little bit further down towards the south, we are going to be seeing some cloudy conditions. This really hasn't changed much over the last couple of days, and it's not going to change much as we go into Sunday. You notice very cloudy conditions all the way to Taipei. Temperatures will stay in the mid to low 20s. As you can see, down towards Manila, though, it's going to be about 29 to about 30 degrees. The heat index will be a little bit higher than that. But down towards Australia, that's where the big news is right now. We're looking at some very wet conditions up here towards the north. Adelaide, 38 degrees. As we go into the next day, 40 degrees. That means all along the Great Bight right here, we're looking at extreme fire dangers for them.
As geeks take on dictators, bloggers turn dissidents, and social networks root for social justice, governments are going cyber, spying on their citizens, erecting firewalls like iron curtains, and closing down websites. We ask, is cyber-generated change virtual or real? Empire at this time on Al Jazeera.